Welcome back to City Education, your home for knowledge in all forms, shapes, and sizes. Today we explore the heart of South Africa's democratic constitution, the Bill of Rights. Now, the Bill of Rights is a framework to limit state power, both procedurally and substantively. Let's break this down. We'll start off by looking at the purpose of the Bill of Rights. It is important to note that the Bill of Rights is not just a chapter in our Constitution. It is the moral and legal heartbeat of our democracy. Section 7, subsection 1, calls it the cornerstone of democracy in South Africa. It affirms the democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. In other words, it tells us why the Constitution exists. It outlines the following reasons: that the Constitution exists to protect individuals from abuse of power, to guide government towards justice, and to rebuild a society scarred by apartheid and inequality. But the Bill of Rights doesn't just inspire, it commands action. Section 7, subsection 2 places a positive duty on the state to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights in the Bill of Rights. As Currie and de Waal explain, this means firstly that the state must respect rights by not infringing them through its laws and action. Secondly, protect rights by preventing violations by others, including private actors. Thirdly, promote rights by raising awareness and embedding rights culture. Finally, fulfill rights by taking steps to realize them, especially social economic rights. This transforms the Bill of Rights from a passive declaration into a living, enforceable commitment, one that empowers ordinary people to hold leaders accountable. Now let's look at procedural limits to power. Procedural limits to state power are about how the government must act when making decisions, passing laws, and exercising authority. Why do these matter? Because even good intentions can harm a democracy if they are carried out without a proper process. As Currie de Waal reminds us, process is power. It determines whether citizens have a voice and whether rights are real in practice. In the Bill of Rights framework, procedural limits include: No. 1. Application of the Bill of Rights. Before any decision is made, you must ask, does the Bill of Rights apply here? If yes, the state must act within constitutional boundaries. This is especially crucial where state action affects individuals directly or indirectly. No. 2. Jurisdiction and standing. Only courts with the right authority can decide a case, and only certain people or groups can bring a case forward. South Africa's standing rules are deliberately wild, allowing not just those directly affected, but also public interest litigants to defend rights in court. Number 3. Justiciability. Not every dispute can be decided by a court. Some matters are purely political questions, better left to Parliament. Procedural limits help judges decide whether a case involves a genuine, enforceable right. No. 4. Publication and public participation. The Constitution requires openness. Laws must be published, and the public must be given opportunity to participate in their creation. In Doctors for Life International versus Speaker of the National Assembly, the Constitutional Court made it clear, without real public involvement, a law's legitimacy is in doubt. No. 5. Signature of the President. Finally, for national legislation to become law, it must be signed by the President, ensuring that the head of state takes formal responsibility for the laws enacted. These procedural safeguards act as checkpoints, stopping power from moving too far without transparency, fairness, and accountability. Now let's zoom into the application of the Bill of Rights. The first step in applying procedural limits is knowing who the Bill of Rights binds. Section 8 of the Constitution answers this. Under Section 8, subsection 1, the Bill of Rights applies to all law, and it binds the legislature, executive, judiciary, and all organs of the state. This is called vertical application, where rights operate between the state and individuals. For example, if the police search your home without a search warrant, they might violate your right to privacy under Section 14. Section 8, subsection 2, goes even further. It outlines that the Bill of Rights can also apply horizontally. This would benefit private parties. For example, an employer firing a worker for being pregnant may violate the worker's right to equality. even though both parties are private. Section 8, subsection 3 empowers courts to apply rights directly or develop the common law to give effect to rights. For example, in Crumelo vs. Holomisa, the Constitutional Court developed defamation law to align with the right to freedom of expression. This wide application is deliberate. It recognizes that in modern society, private power can be just as harmful as state power. Whether it's government or private corporations, the Bill of Rights ensures that human dignity, equality, and freedom remain protected. Now, let's look at jurisdiction and standing. Once we know that the Bill of Rights applies, the next question is, which court can hear the case and who is allowed to bring it? This is where jurisdiction and standing comes in. Jurisdiction refers to the court's legal authority to hear the case. It is important to note the following. The Constitutional Court has the final say on constitutional matters and issues of public importance. The high courts have broad constitutional jurisdiction unless the Constitution says otherwise. Specialized courts like Libre courts or equality courts handle specific dispute matters. If the wrong court hears a case without jurisdiction, the case can collapse before it begins. Standing, on the other hand, asks the question, who has the right to approach the court? South Africa's constitution adopts general standing rules, which are far broader than under the old common law. Section 38 allows the following to enforce rights. Number 1 is anyone acting on their own interest. For example, a person claiming their right to housing has been infringed. No. 2, anyone acting on behalf of another person who cannot act in their own name. For example, a parent acting for a child. No. 3, anyone acting as a member of or in the interest of a group or class of persons, e.g. residents of an informal settlement. No. 4, anyone acting in the public interest. For example, an NGO challenging an unconstitutional law. Number 5, an association acting in the interest of its members. For example, trade union defending workers' rights. Now this reflects the transformative nature of our Constitution. It removes technical barriers so that rights can be enforced by those most able and willing to defend. Cases like Ferrero versus Levine and Doctor for Life show how our courts use these rules to keep the doors of justice wide open. Now let's look at justiciability. Now, even when a court has jurisdiction, not every dispute is justiciable, meaning fit to be considered or decided by a court. Justiciability is about identifying whether a matter involves, firstly, a legal right or duty protected under the Constitution, and no. 2, a concrete dispute that can be resolved through legal remedies. Some matters fall outside the court's reach. For instance, political questions, hypothetical disputes, or abstract disagreements. These safeguards prevent courts from overstepping into political domain, preventing the separation of powers. But it is not always clear. In Doctors for Life International versus Speaker of the National Assembly, the Constitutional Court refused to decide whether Parliament had substantively followed the correct policy in passing health legislation, but it did review whether the process complied with constitutional requirements for public participation. Similarly, in Ferreira vs. Levine, the court stressed that constitutional disputes should not be avoided unless it is plain that they are hypothetical or academic. The golden rule: courts exist to decide concrete disputes about rights. They are not political referees or advisory bodies. Moving on, now we zoom into public participation and transparency. Note that procedural limits are not just about courts and lawyers. They are also about ordinary people having a say in the laws that govern them. The Constitution commits South Africa to an open and democratic government, which means public participation and transparency are not optional extras. They are legal requirements. The obligation flows from Section 59, subsection 1, paragraph A. The National Assembly must facilitate public involvement in its processes. Section 72, subsection 1, paragraph A. The same duty applies to the National Council of Provinces. Section 118, subsection 1, paragraph A. Provincial legislatures must also encourage public participation. These duties make lawmaking a shared process between government and the people, preventing power from becoming remote or unaccountable. The landmark case of Doctors for Life versus Speaker of the National Assembly 2006 further confirmed this principle. The Constitutional Court held that Parliament acted unconstitutionally by passing health legislation without giving the public a reasonable opportunity to participate. The court held that the Constitution contemplates a democracy that is both representative and participatory. Transparency, on the other hand, also requires publication of laws and proposed bills so people can know what is being debated and have a chance to respond. This ties with the value of openness in Section 1 of the Constitution. In short, public participation is a safeguard against secrecy. It strengthens legitimacy, enhances accountability, and ensures that laws reflect the will and needs of the people. We've looked at procedural limits. Now let's look at substantive limits to state power. As established, procedural limits keep the government's processes in check, but they don't answer the deeper question: what can the state actually do? And what is off limits? That's where substantive limits come in. Substantive limits focus on the content of state action. They ensure that even if a law is passed through the correct procedure, it will still be struck down if it is unconstitutional in substance. For example, if a law is passed after public hearings and such a law discriminates unfairly, that law would not pass the substantive review. Now, substantive limits operate in three main fronts. Firstly, interpretation. Courts must interpret rights and laws in a way that promotes human dignity, equality, and freedom, which is covered under Section 39 of the Constitution. Secondly, we have limitations. Section 36 provides that rights can be limited only when the limitation is reasonable and justifiable in an open and democratic society. Thirdly, we have remedies. When a violation occurs, the courts must grant effective remedies to restore the right or prevent future violations. Together, these three elements give the Bill of Rights its teeth, ensuring that it is not a statement of ideals, but a binding standard that all state action must meet.
Put simply,
Procedural limits answer how power must be exercised, while substantive limits answer whether the exercise of power is acceptable under the Constitution. Now let's zoom into the interpretation of the Bill of Rights. Interpretation is not mechanical. It is a value-based process guided by Section 39 of the Constitution. Section 39, subsection 1 of the Constitution sets out three key instructions for courts to follow when interpreting the Bill of Rights. Firstly, courts must promote the values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. This means that when there's ambiguity, courts must choose the interpretation that best advances these foundational values. Secondly, consider international law. The courts must look to international human rights instruments, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights or treaties which South Africa has ratified. Thirdly, may consider foreign law. Under this instruction, courts can draw inspiration from other democratic constitutions. For example, they can use Canada's Charter of Rights or Germany's Basic Law. Now, Section 39 makes the South African Bill of Rights part of a golden human rights conversation. It also prevents isolationist thinking in constitutional interpretation. Section 39, subsection 2, adds that when interpreting any legislation or developing the common law, courts must promote the spirit, purport, and objects of the Bill of Rights. This extends constitutional values into every corner of the legal system. Finally, Section 39, subsection 3, makes it clear that the Bill of Rights does not deny the existence of other rights recognized by common law, customary law, or legislation, as long as they are consistent with the Constitution. In short, interpretation under Section 39 is a transformative tool. It ensures our laws are always moving towards a security-rooted dignity, equality, and freedom. Now, after interpretation, we have limitation of rights. It is important to note that no right in the Bill of Rights is absolute. Even the most fundamental freedoms can be restricted, but only under strict constitutional conditions. Section 36, the General Limitation Clause, sets out when rights can be limited. According to this section, a right may be limited only in terms of a law of general application, meaning it must apply equally to everyone, not target specific individuals, and only to the extent that the limitation is reasonable and justifiable in an open democratic society. The courts must use the proportionality test, weighing firstly the nature of the right, secondly the importance of the purpose of the limitation, thirdly the nature and extent of the limitation, fourthly the relation between the limitation and its purpose, and finally less restrictive means. This clause reflects the balancing act at the heart of constitutional democracy. Rights are powerful, but they must exist alongside order, security, and the rights of others. The key is that the burden of proof is on the state to show that the limitation meets Section 306's
strict test.
Now let's look at remedies. The Bill of Rights would be a little more than fine words without effective remedies to enforce it. When a court finds that a right has been infringed or threatened, it has broad powers under Section 38 and Section 172 subsection 1 of the Constitution to grant appropriate relief. Appropriate relief means a remedy that is fair, just, and suited for the circumstances. The Constitutional Court in Fose versus Minister of Safety and Security made it clear remedies must protect and enforce rights, not merely declare them. Now, common remedies include declaratory orders, interdicts, constitutional damages, structural interdicts, reading in or severance, which is basically modifying a law to make it constitutional. Now, remedies must be effective, practical, and responsive to the violation. Courts may craft innovative remedies when existing ones aren't enough. The aim is always the same, which is to make rights real and enforceable in the lives of ordinary people, and to ensure that the Constitution is not just a promise, but a living guarantee. In conclusion, the Bill of Rights protects individuals from state abuse through procedural safeguards and substantive principles. It is a shield against oppression and a sword for justice. This is City Education, your home for education in all forms, shapes, and size. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.